From time to time, your sanitary pump requires routine maintenance to ensure peak operating efficiency. This video will teach you the standard service procedures of the Waukesha Cherry Burrell Universal Twin Screw Pump. It is important to note the use of food-grade lubricant in the maintenance procedures to ensure proper operation of the pump and its internal components. Use of other types of lubricant may cause damage to internal components, resulting in a malfunctioning pump. Please refer to the operation manual for additional details on where and how to apply lubricant throughout the maintenance process. Remove the cover nuts from the cover and then remove the cover from the body. If necessary, use a soft hammer to tap the cover off the body studs and dowel pins. Next, remove and inspect the cover gasket. Note that on the 220 pump size, which is not shown here, the gasket is installed in the groove on the body and not on the cover. Block the screws from turning using a food-grade blocker. For the 1530 and 130 pump sizes, reference the screw blocking tool in the manual. Once the screws have been blocked, loosen and remove the screw nuts. Remove the screw nut O-ring from the outer O-ring groove on each screw nut. Next, remove the washer retainer O-ring from the inner O-ring groove, followed by the removal of the Belleville washers. Inspect the washers and replace them if damaged. The next step requires removal of the screws. The use of gloves is recommended, as some of the edges may be sharp. Remove the screws simultaneously. Note the markings located on the front of the screws in the recessed area around the shaft spline hole. You will notice an LH to indicate left hand and an RH for right hand. This will be important to reference when reinstalling the screws to ensure proper positioning. The SPX Flow part number is also marked in this area. Remove the seal cap assembly, which contains the seal cap and seal seat, from each shaft. Remove the seal seat from the seal cap and place it on a clean, protected surface. Remove the cap-to-seat O-ring from the larger side or flush side of the seal cap. Remove the cap-to-screw O-ring from the smaller side or product side of the seal cap. Remove the seal from each shaft. With an O-ring removal tool, remove the shaft O-ring from the O-ring groove on each shaft. Next, remove the carrier-to-seal O-ring from each shaft. Remove and inspect the seal wave spring on each shaft. Install the seal wave spring on the shaft so it is positioned on the outside of the seal carrier pins. Note that on the 15 and 220 sizes, the wave spring is a single layer. Make sure the gap in the wave spring is positioned between the pins. Lubricate the shaft O-ring and slide it over the shoulder on the shaft and install it in the O-ring groove. Next, lubricate the carrier-to-seal O-ring and install it in the groove on the inside of the seal carrier. Next, lubricate the outer edge of the seal. Align the drive slots to the pins on the seal carrier and press onto the seal carrier. The seal cap will now be assembled by first lubricating the cap to screw and the cap to seal O-rings and installing them onto the front and back of the seal cap. Next, line up the flats on the seal cap with the flats on the seal seat and place the seal seat on the seal cap. Install the seal cap assembly on the shaft. Make sure the face of the seal seat is seated against the face of the seal previously installed on the shaft. Repeat the seal installation process on the second shaft. In order to service the flush seals of a double mechanical seal, or for ease of replacing product seals and O-rings, remove the pump body. Ensure the shaft O-rings and seal cap and seal seat have been removed. Using an Allen wrench, remove the two body retaining screws. Remove the pump body and place it on a flat, protected surface. When removing the pump body, be careful not to damage the seals with the shafts if the pump is configured with double mechanical seals. For a double seal, remove the seal seats from the shafts by hand. Pull the seal seats toward the end of the shafts. Once removed, remove the shaft O-rings from the grooves closest to the gear case. Next, remove the seals from the seal carriers and place them on a clean, protected surface. Next, remove the carrier to seal O-rings and wave springs. Using an Allen wrench, remove the 3 cap screws holding the seal carrier to the body. It can be helpful to loosen the cap screws halfway and then lightly tap them with a soft hammer in order to help with the removal process. Remove the seal carrier from the body. Remove the carrier to body O-rings from the 2 grooves on the outside of the seal carrier. Lubricate the carrier to body O-rings and install them onto the 2 grooves on the outside of the seal carrier. The flush holes in the body are located toward the outside of the body. Install the seal carriers into the body, making sure to line up the flush holes in the seal carriers with the flush holes in the body. On the back side of the body, use an appropriately sized drift pin to align the holes in the seal carrier with the holes in the body. Once aligned, remove the drift pin. Apply anti-seize compound to the 6-socket head cap screws. Using an Allen wrench, install the seal carriers into the body with the cap screws. Snug down the cap screws by hand, taking care not to over-tighten. Install the seal wave springs around the pins on each seal carrier. Note that on models 15 and 220 UTS pumps, the wave spring is a single layer. Make sure that the gap in the wave spring is positioned between the pins. Next, lubricate the carrier to seal O-rings and install them in the groove on the inside of the seal carrier. Next, lubricate the outer edge of the seals and align the drive slots with the pins on the seal carriers. Then, press the seals into the seal carriers. Alternatively, these steps can be done before installing the seal carrier in the body. For double mechanical seals, install the seal wave springs onto the backside of each seal carrier. For models 15 and 220 sizes, ensure that the gap in the wave spring is positioned in between the pins. Lubricate the carrier to seal O-rings and install them in the grooves on the inside of the seal carrier. Lubricate the seals and, once aligned with the pins on the seal carrier, press the seals into the back side of the carrier. Lubricate the two shaft O-rings and install one O-ring on each shaft in the O-ring groove closest to the gear case. Line up the flats on the inside seal seat with the flats on the shaft and slide the seal seats over the O-ring until they are seated against the base of the shaft. Double-check to ensure that the seal is fully installed by twisting the seal slightly and checking the seal flat engagement. Use the studs to help center and slide the pump body all the way on until it is seated against the gear case. Be very careful not to damage the seals while installing the pump body on the shafts. Note that a double mechanical seal is shown on this body. Next, apply anti-seize compound to the threads of the body retaining screws. Using an Allen wrench, install the two body retaining screws in the holes next to the dowel pins and hand tighten. Lubricate the two shaft O-rings and install one O-ring on each shaft underneath the seal face. Place the seal caps on a protected surface. Lubricate and install the cap-to-screw O-ring on the opposite side of the seal cap, which is the side without the milled flats. Lubricate the cap-to-seat O-ring and install it on the seal cap. Repeat for the second seal cap. Line up the flats on the seal caps with the flats on the seal seats and join together. Install the seal cap assemblies onto the shafts. Make sure the face of the seal seat is seated against the face of the seal previously installed on the shaft. Look at the position of the indexing tooth on each shaft spline and roughly align the screw splines to match. As referenced from the front of the pump, the RH for right hand and LH for left hand markings are on the front of each screw in the recessed area around the shaft spline hole. The SPX flow part numbers are also located here. Making sure each screw spline roughly matches the indexing tooth of each shaft spline, slide the screws onto the shafts as a pair. Once the beginning of the shaft spline meets the screw spline, make sure that the indexing teeth are lined up exactly. Lift up slightly on the screws, then push them in so that the splines engage. Make sure to push the screws onto the shafts completely until they are flush with the edge of the seal caps. Be careful not to pinch your fingers between the screws and the pump body while performing this procedure. Wear protective gloves, as some of the edges may contain sharp edges. If you run into difficulty, test each shaft-to-rotor fit by installing one screw on at a time to better pinpoint the cause of the issue. Assemble the screw nuts. Place the Belleville washer onto the screw nut. The Belleville washer must be installed so the outer edge of the washer raises up over the edge of the screw nut. Install the washer retainer O-ring onto the inner O-ring groove on the screw nut. Install the screw nut O-ring onto the outer O-ring groove on the screw nut and lubricate the O-ring. Apply anti-seize to the threads on the shafts. Install the screw nuts on the pump shafts and hand tighten. Block the screws from turning using a blocking dowel. For models 15, 30, and 130 size pumps, utilize the screw blocking tool as referenced in the manual and torque the screw nuts to the proper specifications. Remove the screw blocker and spin the pump over to confirm it rotates freely. If the pump does not spin over freely, fix the interference before starting the pump. Check that the body and screw faces are flush before installing the cover. Install the cover gasket flat side facing up onto the groove in the cover. Note that on the 220 UTS pump, this gasket is installed in the groove on the body. It may be helpful to lubricate the cover gasket to hold it in place in the groove. For all sizes except the 220 UTS, align the cover holes with the lower cover studs, then slide the cover onto the pump. For the 220 UTS pump size, align the screw case alignment dowels with the holes in the cover, and slide the pump cover over the screws onto the pump. Seat the pump cover against the pump body. Apply anti-seize compound to the threads of the cover studs and hand tighten the cover nuts. Tighten the cover nuts to the specified torque as referenced in the manual. Once the gear case cover has been removed, block the shafts and gears from turning with a soft piece of metal and with an Allen wrench, loosen the screws in the locking assembly until you see a few threads showing. If the locking assembly does not self-release, utilize the jacking holes to loosen the gear. Once removed, replace the screws back into their respective locations on the locking assembly. Inspect the locking assembly. If the locking assembly was exposed to gear lubricant, remove and clean the locking assembly. Lubricate the locking assembly with a light oil and place it in the gear. Note that the bolts on the locking assembly must be loose and lightly oiled. Do not use any oils which contain graphite. Place the locking assembly into the gear so the back of the locking assembly is even with the back of the gear. Install the gear onto the pump shaft as shown. Push the gears back until the locking assembly is resting against the locking nut. Very lightly align the loose gear with the drive gear. Install the seal caps onto the shafts. Next, install the screws onto the shafts, followed by the screw nuts without the O-rings. Tighten down the screw nuts by hand. Check to ensure that the seal caps are clamped down by the screws. If the seal caps can rotate without rotating the screws, then adjust the position of the screws so that both seal caps are fully clamped down and unable to rotate. Finish by firming up the screw nuts with a wrench. While holding the left screw in place, rotate the right screw clockwise until it contacts the left screw. With a feeler gauge, measure the open clearance between the screw flanks. Choose a feeler gauge that is equal to half the screw flank clearance measured previously and insert it between the screw flanks. Holding the left screw in place, rotate the right screw counterclockwise until it securely traps the feeler gauge between the screw flanks. This balances the flank-to-flank clearances. Align the loose gear with the drive shaft gear. Place a soft dowel in the gear teeth to prevent the gears from turning. Hand tighten the locking assembly bolts in an alternating pattern. Finish by torquing the locking assembly bolts in an alternating pattern to the specifications found in the manual. Confirm the clearance between the screws is even on the front and back edges of the screw flanks. Apply anti-seize compound to the gear case cover fasteners. Apply lubricant to the ID of the oil seal on the gear case cover. Insert a new cover gasket and install the gear case cover onto the gear case. Slide the shrouds under the gears and the drive shaft hole over the drive shaft. Make sure the gears do not contact the gear shrouds when the cover is in place. Next, install the two socket head shoulder bolts in the holes by the drive shaft and the hex head cap screws in the remaining holes. Before torquing the bolts, turn the drive shaft and ensure that the gears do not contact the gear shrouds. Torque the socket head shoulder bolts to the specification found in the manual. Torque the remaining hex bolts in a cross pattern to the proper specification as found in the manual. Following these procedures will help you properly maintain your SPX Flow Waukesha Cherry Burrell Universal Twin Screw Pump to maximize operating life and maintain process integrity. To order genuine OEM replacement parts or special tools, contact your authorized Waukesha Cherry Burrell sales representative or visit www.spxflow.com/WCB for more information.